Hello there, a very warm welcome to the program People, Politics and Power with me, Imonia Marere. There have been persistent calls and efforts made to reform the electoral system in Nigeria over time. One form of reform or the other has always taken place after every major election cycle since Nigeria's return to democracy over 25 years ago. But each reform process has always elicited another as the imperfections of the system manifest. In December 2024, the Independent National Electoral Commission INEC published their outcomes of its internal analysis and review of the 2023 general elections and other stand-alone elections that followed. It identified and outlined 142 areas for reform and refinement, ranging from the state of preparedness, voter and political parties management, election technology, to electoral operations and logistics management, as well as resort management, amongst others. Now, out of the 142 areas outlined, the Commission said 86 required administrative action by the Commission itself, while 48 others required action by various stakeholders, including security agencies, communication network providers, political parties, transport unions, civil society organizations, and the media. The Commission outlined 8 major areas that it said required legislative action by the National Assembly. They include resort management with regard to manual transfer versus electronic transmission, early voting for categories of Nigerians who do not vote on election days because of their roles, diaspora voting, and the unbundling of INECs, among others. We are just about 2 years away from the next general election, and it appears not much is being done to operationalize the recommendations by INEC, particularly those that require legislative action by the National Assembly. Now, this is the crux of the matter on the program today. Will the proposed reforms by INEC go far enough to guarantee credible, free, and fair electoral processes? Whose call is it? Why wait until the last hour to adopt a fire brigade approach to reforming the system? And of course, what should we expect of these reforms, even if they happen? Will they provide free, fair, and credible elections in Nigeria? These are the issues we'll be taking a look at on the program today, and we'll get to meet our guest analysts when we return from this break. Stay with us.
Of our dream, the Nigeria we need is the united, indissoluble, and cohesive Nigeria, which guarantees equity, fairness, justice, and prosperity for its citizens. That is our focus on people, politics, and power. It is fresh, insightful, impactful. It's a must-watch. People, politics, and power on AIT.
All right, let's meet our guest analysts who are joining us at the moment virtually via Zoom. We're joined from here in the nation's capital, Abuja, by Ezenwa Nwagu. Ezenwa Nwagu is a chairman, Partners for Electoral Reforms. Thank you so much, Ezenwa, for finding time to join us and breaking up from your very tight schedule to look at this all-important subject matter.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you for having me.
We're also joined by Chineye Nwagu. Chineye Nwagu is a lawyer and is the founder Voter Right Africa. Thank you so much, Mr. Nwagu, for joining us.
Thank you, Emoni, for having me in your program today. And good morning, good afternoon, Nigerians, and people watching from all over the world.
Thank you so much, Chinaye. We understand you are joining us all the way from Canada. Of course, we do appreciate taking our time to speak on this matter. We'll also be joined by Mr. Sam Kagbo, Senior Advocate of Nigeria. He's also a lawyer. He will be joining us in a moment. But let's begin this way. Mr. Wangu, the Independent National Electoral Commission, of course, a few days ago, or in fact, in the past couple of weeks, has been meeting with critical stakeholders. It met with civil society organizations. It has met with the media today. Before then, it met with political parties. And you recall that in December, it actually launched a document which outlined some of the reforms that he said were necessary for reforming the electoral system. Let's begin from there, Mr. Ezenwa. Let's begin from that document, which I'm sure you are familiar with. How extensive or how detailed do you think that document was compared to what you, as an electoral observer and one who has been engaged in electoral reforms over the years, how far do you think it has gone?
Well, I think INEC is involved in some does this kind of audit, self-audit at the end of every election. If you check, you will see the report for 2011. You see the report for 2015, that of 2019. These reports or review, they are product of wide stakeholder engagement. Apart from what INEC itself did, it will invite civil society, will invite to some kind of retreat where these things are harvested. My take is that most of the issues that are contained in that report are recurring issues. Some are administrative, some require legislative action. They are not exactly very far away from what you have in the Justice Ways Electoral Reform Committee reports. You are not going to miss anything if you have read Justice Lemu report on electoral violence after the 2011 elections. So the challenge for me has never been not doing this introspection. The bigger challenge has been the inability of the duty bearers to take decisive, concrete actions that needs to happen either legislatively or from the executive. For instance, the issue of the appointment of the national chairman and resident electoral commissioners is a touchy issue for most Nigerians in terms of whether what the current legal regime is able to provide that independence that is required to oversight our elections. So in reality, for me, is not lack of reports, is not lack of audits. What is required is a bigger, consciousness for the executive, for members of the National Assembly, for the judiciary that oversights the MDAs to do their work with posterity in mind and conscious of the future and also with the fear of God.
All right, Mr. Chinoye, let's bring you in now. I'm sure you have had an opportunity to look at some of those recommendations arising from that audit that Ezenwa just talked about. The audit process is almost like a 4-yearly ritual. After every general election, INEC does its own internal audit, internal analysis, and actually comes out with what it feels arising from, of course, what it collects from the other critical stakeholders would make the electoral process much better. But from what Ezenwa is saying, the problem appears to lie with implementation. How do we go around that issue?
Thank you very much. I want to congratulate INEC for the review they've done. It's normal in any process after an event or an activity, you do a proper review. But I'd like to key in with what my brother on set has said. And I'd like to take some broader look at the whole situation. And the big question I always ask is, why do Nigeria and indeed Africa prefer to take a palliative, knee-jerk, brick-by-brick approach to fundamental issues around politics, around development, around economy? From us at Vote Rights, the issues that we've looked at is that leadership recruitment is very, very key to the development of Nigeria and Africa. The history and comparative history has enunciated the fact that resources is not the key thing in development. What is fundamental to development is to have the right kind of people with competency, capacity, and the skill set to manage any climb, for the outcomes that will generate development and improvement in the quality of life of people. So leadership recruitment is at the key of that. And that is the other name for leadership recruitment, of course. The institutional structure for leadership recruitment is elections. And when you look at elections, there are three major components in an election: the voters, the institutions, and I'll add the political parties that provide choices for people to make. Now, the question we need to always ask is, the voters, that is the citizens, do they have the intellectual, psychological, and emotional capacity to make quality choices, choosing their leaders? The other component, the institutions, are they independent enough? Do they have the structure, the systemic and institutional capacity to deliver free, fair, credible election, devoid of manipulation? The political parties, do they have the right skill set, the capacity, to produce candidates that are qualified, quality candidates from whom the people will choose? And from our own analysis, we have come to terms that these three components of our electoral and leadership recruitment process are all wobbling. And so the question is, what is the way forward? We, as Nigerians, have agreed.
Mr. Chinoye, are you still there with us? All right. We hope that he's able to get back with us. But let's, at this moment, welcome Mr. Sam Kagbo, a senior advocate of Nigeria. He's joining us now. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome.
Thank you.
And we're looking at the imperative for electoral reforms. You recall that in December 2024, INEC published the outcome of its own audit, its own review and analysis of the 2023 elections, the conduct of the 2023 elections, and maybe one or two other standalone elections that took place after that. There were at least 3 governorship elections after that. Yes. He put all of that together and made recommendations. And he came out with about 142 items. 86 of those items, he said, could be dealt with administratively by the commission itself and by the other critical stakeholders that are very germane to the smooth, free and fair conduct of elections. But he said that about 8 of those items would require legislative action. In other words, there needs to be some action by the National Assembly to get those items legislated on or to make for more credible elections. And some of those items include, for instance, the whole question of transmission, or should I call it, the transmission of results whether or not it should
Or
be manual, or
real
whether or
time.
not it should be in real time, or it should be manual. And then there's also the whole issue of diaspora voting and early voting for those of us Nigerians who on election days are unable to vote because we are engaged in one official activity related to the elections, of course, or the other. The question that many have been asking is, that report was put out in December. We are already in February. We are just about 2 years away from the next elections. And what exactly is holding back putting this issue on the front burner?
I think the question answers itself. If the administrator says he needs legislative backing, statutory backing for them to implement those items, then the issue is who is to make the laws, the National Assembly. The question is what sort of interfaces have they been having, what sort of synergy have they been having, and what effort have they been putting into getting the attention of the National Assembly to ensure that the National Assembly pass the necessary laws for them to be able to go to the next step. So that's the one side. The other side, too, executive will, because no matter what you say, on both ends, there is money involved. So most of the time, you look at the budget, the way our budget system goes. If there is no item on that budget, no matter what somebody tells you, don't listen, because what? Money speaks. For every item or any political action that you want to implement, there is monetary involvement. So if there is no money budgeted for that, know that that issue is not yet on the burner. So these are the things that we need to address. That is the legislative action and perhaps the executive support.
Now, a follow-up to that is, I'm sure you have seen those, if not all the 142 items, but those items that will require legislative action. For you, from the review, from the audit of INEC, do you think that they go far enough, given the complaints that and challenges that we have had or during and after every general election in Nigeria?
You see, I am one of those people who is a little bit ceremonious about our own, sorry to use the word, but I think that's what it is. This supermarket mentality, we over-legislate. So many laws, forgetting the fact that all that we are talking about are two things. The people believing in the system and the people believing in the system believing in the people. Once we have that agreement, more of these things would just go on smoothly. What am I talking about here? No matter what law, and indeed, the laws are there. If you look at the Electoral Act, I'm not too sure there is any other country that could have as comprehensive and extensive legislation on elections as we've had. Even to the extent that when we go outside the country and somebody asks you, where do you specialize on as a lawyer? What's your area of specialty? And you say electoral law. They look around to say, what is that? You understand? Because to them, electoral law and electoral process is not so much of something that you should, as a lawyer, expend so much time and energy to the extent that you say you're an expert in them. But for us here, it is most necessary. And why is that so? The human factor, the human element. No matter what the laws that you put in, as long as we've not rehumanized ourselves to the point that we inculcate, I'm not talking about moral values here, but democratic values, and understand, just like the last speaker is talking about, the essence of the vote and the relationship between the vote and our own standard of living. Until we get to that point, no matter what laws that we make, believe me, we're going to get it. I was in the U.S. to monitor the election. I went under the auspices of IFES. And let me give you instances to tell you how much that the system there believes in the people and how the people believe in the system. In DC, you can walk to the polling booth on the election day and say, hey, this is my ID card. I am an adult. I want to vote. I have not registered. 15 minutes you'll be registered and you vote and you're out of the place. We went to a mall, and I called one senior officer of the APC, who is also a member of the INEC. I said, can you see what you saw at the door, the entrance? What did we see? 2 polling booths. Nobody is manning them. But that's where those who are doing their pre-election, what they call the pre-date elections, you put your ballot paper and go and dump it there. Nobody cares, but the electoral managers will come and pick them in the evening, and they form part of what? The counting, the votes that will be counted. Can you imagine you trying that here? It's impossible. Why? We've not rehumanized ourselves, developed to the point whereby we allow the system to work, whereby the system will believe us to the point that irrespective of where we are and what we want to do, the system says, go on because I know, but what? You only do the right thing. We need to get to that point. But if we don't get to that point, we would go over. Because let me tell you something. For every cycle of election, there will be electoral amendment. There has never been any cycle of election that is not what? Followed by electoral amendment. That has always been. Yes, there have been some development. There has been some development for now. Those olden days of ballot snatching and all of that, I think we have put that behind us. But the actors are smarter, especially the politicians. They are always ahead because they are attentive to the process. They know they are stakeholders. You understand? They are involved in the reforms. So they know what is coming and they plan for it. And they've always beat it. For now, much of the headache is vote buying. How do you prevent that? How many police would you put in all the wards of the country to police that? Where the politicians will go overnight and do the vote buying. The people who are coming there most of the time, they are coming there with already a bought mandate, because overnight somebody has given an influential actor to distribute money to aggregate votes. That is the problem. Would you expect INEC, what sort of ingenuity or sort of process would INEC put to stop that?
That now is my point of departure, and that's
Yes.
why I bring in Ezenwa at this point in time. Ezenwa, as Mr.
Yes,
Kagbo has said, and this is true, after every election or during every election cycle in Nigeria, the blame is always placed squarely on the shoulders of INEC. Nobody talks about the other critical stakeholders in the process. INEC is always the whipping child of every so-called electoral malpractices and all of that. But there are those who are behind these malpractices. And it appears to me that in carrying out these audits, this review, after the 2023 elections, INEC is saying very clearly, look, the fault is not with us, it is with all of, or it's not just with us as a commission, but all of us who are involved in the process.
I think it's okay to quickly deal with the issue of this challenge of, INEC and the challenges that come with the electoral reform industry that we have in Nigeria. The electoral reform industry is powered by a political economy in which every legislative year, indeed, what has even happened now is that they have inculcated electoral reform as a standing committee of the National Assembly. What used to be ad hoc has now been bureaucratized. So you have to continue to fund amendment of laws that you have not tested over a period of time. The 2022 Act was just 1 year old when we used it to conduct 2023 election. So I've always argued that we should be able to allow some time to deal with these reforms. That's number one. That INEC is the fall guy is understandable. The politicians are dispensers of patronage and cronyism. So people don't like to put their feet on the fire because of the consequences. But there are no consequences for howling on INEC. That's on the side. And even if you look at it now, INEC, three of its commissioners have been shown the way out. And like the learned Sikh was talking about, was INEC since last year, March, actually last year, suspended those resident electoral commissioners of Adamawa, Sokoto, and Abia. It has taken almost 1 year after for the executive to take the issue to the National Assembly to do what is required to relieve them of their job. And from what we see now, even up till now, they were earning salaries, full salaries while they were on suspension without doing any work. So that brings us to the issue that he was talking about, the institutional oversight that should come from the executive is late in coming. The one that the National Assembly has to do is also late in coming. Of the Justice Uwais report, the ones that are of administrative consequence, INEC has implemented almost 69 of those that are administrative. The ones that need legislative action have not one of them have been not one has been taken care of. So that's on the side. But again, the bigger challenge for me is that there are issues that keep cropping up that we're also not dealing with. Number one is this issue of this by-election, for instance. If somebody resigns, to go and become a senator, resigns to go and be a minister, that senator creates a need for election in his senatorial district. If a House of Rep member decides to go to the Senate from that same area, he creates opportunity again. Somebody in the State House of Assembly may want to contest the same position. So you are forcing INEC to conduct, elections year in, year out. As we speak now, there are about 14 by-elections that are still pending that INEC needs to conduct with the FCT election, with the Anambra election. So you continue to, it's not healthy for our country to be in a situation in which we are always organizing elections. And I think something needs to drastically be done to ensure that that does not continue.
What would be your recommendation in that line?
It is quickly to say, for instance, that the parties can, replace. The parties can replace if that by-election is occasioned by death or by resignation. They should be able to replace the party that particular person is holding that office in their state should be able, because votes in Nigeria are given to political parties, not to individuals. So those political parties can, that's one way that we can, but it is a conversation, a broader conversation that we can hold. The learned Sikh talked about vote by. The bigger challenge is what both the INEC chairman and civil society have hammered on. The primary election. The primary election is the far more important election, and it tails into what my brother in Canada talked about leadership recruitment. The place where the political parties present candidates for us to choose from, there is dollarization of the vote in the primaries. And we have seen that on national television, and we have also seen people boast about it, that even now political parties are beginning to charge people that they will be statutory delegates some money to become delegates, because they now know that it is a transactional relationship. So if the leadership recruitment process, the primary of political parties is that transactional, and nothing is done about it, then the poor people who, eventually in their communities are being pauperized to the point where they can take 2,000, they can take 3,000, our focus. So it is a big issue for stakeholders, for security agents, for the media, for civil society to be able to pay bigger attention to this. And they don't require legislative action. They require a mindset shift. They require deliberate, interest in ensuring that we have an election that meets the challenges of the times. And finally, for me, is the issue of early voting that you are talking about. The most enlightened segment of society are the ones that have been put aside by the fact of the responsibility that they have taken in the democracy. Whether they are the security agencies, if in voter registration, the security agents go and get their voting card because they can't exercise what my brother from Canada talked about in terms of enlightened voting. The media, the civil society, the medical people who will be on duty at that point in time, they've all been put out from voting. And it is deliberate, because if you take that chunk of enlightened patriotic voters away from the voting arena, then you allow the kind of things that we see in voting, which eventually rebounds back to the blame that I talk on INEC.
All right, let's bring in Chinoye now. Chinoye, this issue of early voting, let's look at that very, very quickly. I've had the privilege of covering elections in many African countries and even outside of the African continent. And the question of early voting is one that is treated with a lot of seriousness in these places, where persons, individuals who will be critical in terms of other duties and responsibilities in the conduct of elections, including journalists, security personnel, medical doctors, and what have you, are allowed to vote well ahead of election day, and those votes are then collated, put together and added to what comes on election day. But the fear in Nigeria has always been that if you do that, there might be chances of such votes being manipulated. What do you think we need to do to prevent that kind of scenario and ensure that those who should vote, who have the right to vote, who are registered to vote, vote because of their responsibilities on election day?
Yeah, thank you. It looks like I was caught up the other time when I was making analysis. And I like to look at things from a holistic perspective. Yes, if you notice, like you rightly pointed out, Mark, a lot of our other African countries have left us behind in terms of electoral reforms and election management because of one thing that I was trying to allude to. From what the learned Six said and from my brother Eze once said, the whole thing revolves about one thing: the human component, the human being, the Nigerian person. This whole thing is about the aggressive quest for power. Power for what? You know, the system does not have confidence in the people. The people does not have confidence in the system. So early voting has become a practice in the Western society. It's become a practice across a lot of African countries because the whole idea around early voting or diaspora voting or all those kind of reform is to make sure that nobody is de-enfranchised, because franchise, the power to be part of the leadership recruitment process is supposed to be an inalienable right of every qualified citizen of a country. You should have a say on who has responsibility over you. But the point that I'm trying to make, and for which we are coming, the angle we are coming from, is that Nigeria seems to be like an orphan. Nobody agrees that Nigeria belongs to them. Nigeria seems unowned. And that's why everybody who is right-minded should support the political and constitutional reform of Nigeria. Because the whole essence is grabbing of power. Power for what? Today, a section of the country is in leadership in Asoro, the other sections are crime marginalization. Last time it was Buhari, the other sections were crime marginalization. Next, so we continue on this merry-go-round. And let me also point to something my brother said, which is the political economy we operate in. Since 1999 to date, every session of National Assembly have, tried one form, adding one brick to our electoral management laws. They've graduated to a robust constitutional amendment, which amounts to almost nothing in its developmental implication on the country, especially electoral and constitutional issues. Now, so the issue is, it's not about absence of laws. Nigeria is not lacking in legislation. I studied law. I've been around the world. We have some of the best laws that can govern any decent society anywhere in the world if the people who will obey the law, who will make the law, who will interpret the law, have come to an agreement that this will lead us to development. And it is those kind of conversations, those kind of approaches, those kind of steps are the things needed at the moment in Nigeria, where we need to have the right kind of leaders. And that's why we are focused on leadership recruitment. How do we, process that area to be able to, produce the right quality of human beings to administer our processes whose psychology, emotions are all geared towards development. But to hit on what you just asked me, what has fueled the success of early voting and breaking elections in components is the deep penetration of technology globally. Today, technology is driving almost every aspect of life in many modern and developed societies. So, whilst we are here, since we have refused to deal with the big elephant in the room, which is restructure Nigeria, devolve power and make every segment of Nigeria have a sense of belonging and feel, Nigeria will move from being an orphan to being owned by Nigerians. We must invest heavily in technology. And like the Leonard Six said, when you look at our budgeting system, when you look at how we spend our money, right, it tells the story. If we think leadership recruitment is very vital to our development and survival as a nation, we will, of course, invest a lot of resources to deploying the right kind of technology to produce the outcome that we, have a semblance of transparency, fairness, and give some level of integrity to the electoral process. I pity those guys in INEC. I really pity them, right? Because, like you have pointed out, at every turn of events, they are the scapegoat. Just recently, and I'm happy that happened. I think it was in Port Harcourt, in Uyo. Hello, are you hearing me?
Yes, we are hearing you. In Uyo, in Akwa Ibom State, where yes,
a professor was sent to jail, for manipulating electoral results. So such actions, such news, are very good coming out from our climb, because it shows that people are meant to take responsibility for their actions. When you have a role to play in a society, you must take full responsibility on how the outcome happens. If we can expand, those approaches to our electoral process, maybe it could serve as deterrent to those who continue to abuse our electoral system. Because, like I said initially, leadership recruitment is a major factor in our development. And if we do not deal with it holistically and resolve that quagmire, it will be difficult, because everybody all over the world, even where we are, people are shocked that Nigeria, with its abundant resources, human and material, is, walking like a limping giant. Everybody
All
cannot,
right.
nobody
Mr.
can
Chinoye,
understand.
let's explore that relationship between leadership and the electoral process in leadership recruitment and the electoral process in Nigeria.
Yes.
And I'd like to take it from two perspectives. A perspective that is outlined by Chinoye and the one by Ezewan earlier on, which is that whether or not we can expect credible, free, fair elections in Nigeria, when in actual fact, the recruitment process for those elections, for those who are nominated to conduct those elections, are tainted, in the sense that the political parties are themselves not democratic in their practices.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm happy that both of my colleagues have touched on the issue of internal party democracy, because just like they rightly said, our own constitution has given the power and authority to recruit public officers to the political parties. In other countries, it's political leaders, religious leaders that will recruit the managers of the public space. In other places, they have their own, what do you call it now, system. But here, we've said, let the political party recruit the personnel of the governance system. And therefore, they are very, very important. So much so that our own constitution, unlike other countries, I have not read where in the American Constitution, the Constitution made provisions for political parties and giving them specific rules. But here, just like I've said, the Constitution gave them specific rules, specific mentioning, meaning that they are key to the governance process. But what do we have? And we have to face their reality, because many of us don't want to have any dealings with political parties. We believe that they are still playing the dirty job. But mind you, that would come that dirty December. That would what? Throw all the jamboree at us. Now, we have to look at what is happening in the world to know that that devil is coming home, and the next time is going to come with the 7 heads, if that is the phrase. Look at what is happening in America. The money men have taken over, and they are telling the world that money is important. And they're telling the world that with money, we can capture power and what? Redraft even our own constitution and our own trajectory. And they are getting away with it. Our own money men here, who are part of the oligarchic system that is coming, are looking at that. Tomorrow, I'm going to tell you, people are going to go out there brazenly buying people out of even contention at the primaries and buying the nomination of political parties and come at us. At the end of the day, we would have what? The sort of quality that money has bought from the political parties. So we have that problem, and to me it is real. And the only way I think we can moderate the consequence of that is for us to be participants. Irrespective of who you are or where you are, join a political party. Yes, you'll be elbow out, but the more you are who will be insisting on the due process and will be aspiring for quality, the better the outcome. But if we leave the present actors the way they are and we just leave it for them, believe me, year in, year out, they're going to give us choices of what? The devil and the deep blue sea. And at the end of the day, who do we blame? Ourselves. Because the moment you give that mandate, the moment you give that person the vote, in quote, that person, one way or the other, and mind you, This is what we are ignoring. We have a presidential system. The president, to my mind, I've written about it, I've emphasized it, from its origin to today, is not a democratic institution. It is not a democratic, what would I call it, authority. The essence of having the National Assembly is to checkmate it and make sure what? They contain hypocrisy to what? Grab more power beyond the one that is given to it by the
Constitution.
The Constitution. All over the world, if you do not have a very effective, functional parliament or a legislative body, believe me, I would rather live in a country where you have a bandit as leader than in that country. Because what? The president would, by the day, be adding to his power so much so that he wake up tomorrow, he thinks that he's God, and he's going to be playing God. I don't want us to come home. I'm just talking in theory.
Yes.
But look at what we have now. What would stop Tinubu from doing what he wants as at today, the Nigeria that we are? To my mind, whatever he is today is a benevolent leader. Because what? We do not have the National Assembly that would say, hey, wait a minute, we are here as a buffer. We are here as a representative of the people to ensure that what? We limit you to the powers that were given to you. We're not talking about the kings, whereby what? The parliament was what? Is a beneficiary of powers that were taken from the king. Here, no. The constitution that establishes you gives you power, and you have to act within that limit. The judiciary that is supposed to limit you, that has what? The powers of judicial review to ensure that every public functionary, irrespective of who you act within your limit. And the limit is what? The power and space that is given to you by the law books. Where is it today? It has been incapacitated.
That's a discussion for another day.
No, it is for us to continue really reflecting on this to see why we are where we are.
Okay. All right, so we are rounding up our discussion now, and I'd just like to ask you, what do you think needs to be done between now and maybe in the next 6 months to bring some of these recommendations by INEC in terms of electoral reforms into proper shape? What is expected of all the other stakeholders in the process, and not just INEC alone? All right, it appears that Ezenwa is not there. Let's get your take on this, Mr. Chinenye Wagu, very quickly as we round off our discussion. What do you think needs to be done now? Who and how should it be done to ensure that the proposed electoral reforms are properly structured and put in place before the next election?
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Electoral reforms are very, very important today. It should actually be in the front burner of whatever we are doing, and it's something that every Nigerian must be involved in. We need to all participate in a process of leadership recruitment. We need to talk to our legislators. We need to, harmonize opinion on way forward. Quickly, what can be done from my perspective is we need to invest a lot in technology, because technology is making a lot of things more transparent, more open. People can monitor, review, and participate. So investment in technology is very key in our electoral process. Mark, I'd like to just refer to an article I wrote many years ago, for which I also discussed on Focus Nigeria many years ago, when President Obasanjo was the president of Nigeria, and he was banding the word reform all over the place. And the title of that article is Reforming the Unreformable. And the crux of my message in that article was that nobody reforms a system it benefits the most. So the issue is that Nigerians, like this Leonard Six said, a lot of people have left the whole electoral reform process in the hands of those who are politicians, who will be the biggest beneficiary of any reform they are making for the electoral process. So the typical greedy, hypocritical, and power-hungry Nigerian politician will look at the laws and amend them and reform them in a way it will suit them. So that is why every Nigerian, enlightened, learned, in whatever form or shape that you fall into, must be invested in this electoral reform conversation, leadership recruitment conversation. But like I said, I'd like to drop this as but the biggest issue in Nigeria today is restructuring the country.
Okay.
If we do not face it as a big elephant in the room, we will keep running around circle. All in how many years of democracy? We are still talking about this. We are still talking about ephemeral, things that are very minor. The
Okay.
issue is
So
that
your take is that we are treating the symptoms and leaving the major
exactly we are
disease
treating symptoms and
untreated.
leaving the major ailments.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chineye. Finally, Leonard Sik, what do you think INEC can do to help sanitize the political parties?
Education, educating the public. And believe me, until I'm saying this, we rehumanize ourselves. We will not go nowhere. And mind you, no one aspect of us or of our own being that will develop over and above the average. The human being is the problem here. I agree entirely with my friend from Canada who is saying if we deploy technology, the more of it that we have, the less the human participation. And the more we remove the human in the process, the better the process. But also for us, INEC has one of its duty, voter education. That education goes beyond this seasonal releases. It should be, to me, they should interface with the school system so that part of our civic learning, in whatever form you structure it and constitute it, should include the electoral process.
Catching them young.
Very much so.
Thank you
very
so much. Leonard Sik, Mr. Sam Kabo, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, thank you so much for your time. Chineye Nwogu, he is a lawyer and founder of Vote Right Africa. He joined us all the way from Canada. Thank you for your time. And of course, we also had Ezenwa Nwogu, who is the chairman, Partners for Electoral Reforms, who joined us also virtually from here in the nation's capital. Thank you so much for investing your time with us on the program today. We'll see you again when we bring you a fresh edition of People, Politics, and Power. Like they say, the responsibility for a credible, free, and fair electoral process is the responsibility of every one of us. We are all critical stakeholders in the electoral process. Bye for now.